Hello out there. Thanks everybody for joining us today. This is Bill Hammond. I'm the product marketing team here at Precisely, and I'm joined today by Denise Tabor, who's a member of the product management team. And our topic for today is the benefits of modernization, specifically modernizing from an IMS database environment into a Db2 environment on your mainframes, on your IBM Z systems. So before we get into the actual content, a couple of housekeeping things I always like to mention. One, don't feel the need to take tons of notes and try to keep up with everything. You will get both a copy of the recording and a copy of the slide deck, so you'll have that. Please share it with your colleagues, anyone who is interested in the presentation that you think could benefit from it. Encourage you to share them once you have those. And then the other thing is, if you have questions during the course of the presentation, please feel free to enter them in the Q&A box there on your right-hand side of your screen. So we'll get at least to a few of those as we get to the end. So with that as sort of the housekeeping and preamble, let's talk through how we're going to break this topic down. I'm going to spend a little bit of time just talking about the general benefits and the activity around modernization, and then specifically how it relates to people that are using IMS and have IMS running on their mainframe. And then get into a little discussion about minimizing the risks of moving from an IMS environment and moving that stuff into Db2 and the things that you need to consider that could potentially cause issues for you. And then I will transfer over to Denise to talk a little bit more specifically on how our SyncSort Optimize IMS, that's the product we can use to help you make this transition. She'll get into how that works and a little bit about the kind of things you need to consider, benefits, is it right for you, kind of a conversation. And then we'll wrap up with some Q&A. We'll have some time, as I said, at the end for Q&A. So with that having been said, let's dig into some of the content here. On the modernization and IMS topic, modernization in general kind of falls in the category of digital transformation. That's a fairly generic phrase that analysts love using. You see it in the press. And the thing that's important is to realize that virtually everybody seems to be going through this. It's a growing global spending number you can see there by 2026. Also, the IT budgets that are being looked at, Probe CX is where this number comes from. 51% of the dollars in IT budgets in this year, 2024, will be spent on these things that fall into the umbrella of digital transformation. And again, modernization really falls into that camp as well. So this is an area that people are not only paying attention to and trying to understand and implement, they're spending dollars on it. They're devoting a lot of their budgets to this particular thing. So that, voting with their pocketbook, this is an important thing. So the question then becomes, so if that's what's happening, what's driving that to happen? Why are people so focused on this mainframe modernization element? And it comes down to a couple of things. We'll talk through a bunch of them, but the key drivers are really kind of top level is integrating the mainframe, the data that's on there, the important transactional data with other technologies in the environment and using more modern technologies. We see this at Precisely in a lot of cases where people are getting data off their mainframe and into, say, analytic tools, so they can look at performance and security issues and things like that. That's kind of getting log data off the mainframe. We also have products at Precisely here that are in the midst of this mainframe modernization piece, when they're getting application level data often or sharing it out into cloud-based platforms like Databricks and things like that. So we see a lot of interest in our customer base of trying to leverage the value of the information and the data that is on that mainframe and then getting it off in a way that is will work with the other modern technology and the applications that they're already using to do things like security, to do things like application performance monitoring, to do things like just the regular ERP sort of business. So with that as one of the drivers, the other piece that we see is people are looking to make sure they're getting the best bang for their buck out of the dollars that they're spending in the mainframe environment. I know more than once when I've talked to somebody who's responsible for their mainframe, their common, I guess I would call it, mantra is that I'm always looking for ways to reduce costs. The mainframe is one of those items that always exists at the top of the how many, where are we spending our money list as an IT organization. So most of the people I talk to, they're very concerned about what can I do to make sure I'm optimizing that dollar spend, because that's the question they're getting asked by CTO, CFO, those kind of level people. They wanted those expenses to be justified. Another challenge that people have, and which is driving them to a more modernization as a approach here, is attracting and keeping the mainframe professionals that they do have. There's simply not a growing pool of talent in this, a technical talent in this space that is growing as fast as you're seeing some of the people that have been in this space for years retire. So there's a real supply and demand problem around the skills that people need to run their mainframes. So if they can run more modern applications and more modern things on their mainframe, i.e., maybe it's easier to find a Db2 skill set than it is to find an IMS skill set, that can help with addressing this particular challenge that they have. And then I think this is not a mainframe specific sort of issue, but reducing the risk of failures and data breaches. And let's face it, the mainframe is a tremendously resilient system. There's not a huge amount of abject failures where it just isn't working, but there's slowdowns, there's issues, there's component failures, things like that do happen. And there also is the risk of data breaches. And you can open the paper all the time. That's an old phrase, right? Open the paper. You can see online all the data breaches that get so much attention in the press, and there's been some really big ones recently that did have companies that did have mainframes involved. So that is a concern, and why people want to keep their systems up to date and as modern as possible to make sure they're taking advantage of the increasing security that's being delivered in later and later versions of both applications, operating systems, things like that. So these four drivers are really what's keeping people's attention focused on modernization. So when you start to look at modernization, what's it really trying to accomplish? We talked a little bit about optimizing the system, but what does that really mean? That's performance, that's scalability, and maybe most importantly is flexibility, being able to have the ability for that mainframe to live in a multi-platform environment and kind of be a first-class citizen, not a silo, but a part of that environment and working with all those other pieces. Another goal of the modernization is to reduce the operational costs. The idea being, the more current tools that you're using, the more they should help you with just overhead and maintaining costs. Another goal that I mentioned a little bit earlier is this integration that's going on. And we see more and more of this, and I, sitting here as part of Precisely, it's just something we're dealing with our customers across the spectrum, no matter what vertical market you want to talk about, financial services, retail, wholesale, shipping, logistics, all those kind of things. People that have mainframe systems are no longer in a world where those systems exist separately or by themselves or are managed separately. They're managed as part of a larger IT strategy. And so that means integrating those capabilities of the mainframe, the data on the mainframe, the processes that run on the mainframe, the workloads that run there, and being able to leverage the data that those things create or generate in other areas alongside all the other systems that you may have. But at the same time, recognizing that the mainframe is, for these companies that do have mainframes, and we know not everyone has a mainframe, but the people that do, they don't have a mainframe if it's not going to be a really strategic, mission critical part of their environment. So we are looking at, companies that put the IBM Z system in there as a fundamental, and word you can see here is uses backbone. I would call it, a fundamental building block of everything else their IT organization does. So what is modernization? If those are the goals of what you're trying to get with modernization, what are the kind of things you need to do? And, enhancing user experience interaction, that obviously has a ton of benefits for the ultimate users, the people that are interacting with the mainframe. But it also helps with that issue we talked about earlier in terms of the mainframe expertise that may be retiring or you're losing to whatever marketplace challenge you have. Making sure that the user experience is as easy as possible can help mitigate some of that expertise loss that you may be seeing. Updating the programming languages, using more current and popular operating systems, and not operating systems, but excuse me, programming languages, and not being as mainframe specific. Linux on the mainframe is a big piece that didn't exist, until a few years ago, and then some of the opportunities that brings. So you can modernize your mainframe in the choices you make around programming language and things. The one I've got highlighted here in the middle, improved data access and management, and that's kind of where we're going to end up going when we talk about IMS to DB2. Another element that falls into this mainframe modernization, and we work really closely with a number of companies in the cloud space. Notably, we have a relationship with AWS, and we're helping them move those mainframe workloads into the cloud for agility and cost efficiency. They're still running mainframe workloads, but moving that into the cloud is central to what they consider their mainframe modernization effort on the AWS platform. And then adopting DevOps practices that will lead to more efficient and productive application development on the mainframe. Those are all different things that you can actually implement, deploy, select from as you're talking about doing mainframe modernization efforts. So now we talk about that data access and data thing. I wanted to take just a second to, not educate you too much on exactly how IMS works or anything, but, just kind of recap where we are here. IMS is a hierarchical database. It's not a relational database, but it has fantastic performance for data transaction processing. And that's what the mainframe has always been so what it excelled at so much. And IMS has been in these mainframe organizations for decades. It's been around for a long time. There's a tremendous amount of legacy knowledge that exists in companies that have mainframes around IMS. And people have been able to keep it running and keep it going for years. And people deploy IMS to run really mission critical applications, but it's not the easiest thing to write and modify and change. So the people that have those IMS skills can be both hard to find and also very valuable. So that's what's going on really with IMS right now. What's also happening though is some of the concerns. There's a lot of costs, both direct and kind of ancillary, around supporting IMS. Staffing, I've mentioned a couple of times now. Licensing the database system itself is not an insignificant expense. And generally, people who have IMS run a number of third-party management tools from people like BMC, CompuWare, CA, and even from IBM. Things that they get that charge additional license fees to run on the mainframe for your IMS environment. And then generally people are looking at upgrading their environment to try to keep it as current as possible every couple of years. And those upgrade charges can be significant as well. So IMS comes with a lot of capability and a lot of possibilities, but it does have some difficulties and costs around continuing to support it. And there are some significant benefits to moving from an IMS environment to a DB2. You've got more support for more modern applications, particularly in the web kind of world, relational database, more support for agility and doing things faster and making changes to applications happens easier in a DB2 based environment. And it doesn't come with some of the infrastructure costs, we'll call them, that IMS does carry with it. So in that environment where you've got a choice really between IMS and DB2, what are the kind of things that are compelling for people who are looking to potentially move to DB2? There's technological advantages, relational databases over hierarchical databases. There's just a flexibility element that the relational database offers. And frankly, it's a more, dare I say, normal, it's a more pervasive database architecture that people, maybe even outside of the mainframe, are familiar with. There's a lot of people who are familiar with DB2 that don't work on a mainframe, but I mean, IMS, you're a mainframe person there. So there's just a level of flexibility. Having the compatibility with SQL in the DB2 world makes a lot of that brings a lot of that flexibility we're talking about. You can do things with SQL commands that you can't do in an IMS world. And it used to be there was a performance in difference between IMS and DB2, and what we've seen really is that performance difference has gone away, where DB2 performance and the scalability, how big a DB2 environment can get, really is every bit as powerful or scalable as any of the IMS scenarios that we see out there. I've hit a couple times in the talent availability, but just to reiterate, it's getting harder and harder to find people that have IMS on their resume. It's a skill set that is not being replenished in a lot of areas. So if you do lose your 30 year plus employee, the IMS replacing those skills can be quite hard. Again, as I mentioned, DB Tool just offers a larger pool of people that you can bring in, and they will know the database and be very familiar with it. And going forward, kind of a strategic thing, you can take an existing developer or a database administrator and spend money to train them on IMS. That's doable. There's training classes out there. There's opportunities to do that. But when you look at kind of where the world is moving, it sure makes a lot more sense to invest those dollars in DB2 skills. So bringing people on in the DB2 environment and training them on DB2 might be a strategically better move than continuing to propagate the IMS lock-in that you have. The other thing that is people are thinking of moving to DB2, IBM continues to invest in DB2, and I think it's fair to say that there's a pretty high level of confidence in everybody's part that DB2 on the mainframe is going to be something they're going to continue to invest in the future, and it's got a long runway here as a database platform that will run on the mainframe. So there's really isn't a concern or a risk that you feel like you're taking on by investing in DB2. That's a pretty safe bet to realize that that's going to be where you're going to spend your money on the database, mainframe database. DB2 can be easier to recover in a disaster recovery scenario. If you have to bring a DB2 database back online, generally it's easier to do that than it is an IMS database. And because DB2 is, again, more of a modern approach, the security that's going on around the DB2 tends to be more robust, and that's becoming, as we talked earlier about data breaches and stuff, more and more important to protect your company's personally identifiable data or important critical data. DB2 offers some security feature advantages in that situation. So sort of wrapping up where we are with this IMS to DB2 conversation, even though IMS has been, the star for decades and the real workhorse doing database operations on the mainframe, it's getting harder and harder to support that environment because of people, because of costs, just for a number of different reasons that we've gone into. IMS is becoming harder and harder to continue with. So in order to get off the IMS platform, you face a couple of challenges. You can rewrite all of your existing applications from an IMS focused or an IMS backend to a DB2 backend. You can do that. It is potentially really expensive. You have challenges with the scope of those things getting so expanded that they never actually complete. So there's been a lot of people that have tried to do this and fail. Meanwhile, you have to keep the IMS application going while you're rewriting the new one. That's tremendously resource intensive to do that. These IMS applications that you're risking this replatforming or rewriting effort, those are not like small, insignificant applications. Those are mission critical, really important issues and workloads that they're doing. So fooling around with it, redeveloping it, hoping it works, having to do all that testing to make sure, that can be a pretty risky undertaking. So you've also got this challenge of rewriting those applications or replatforming, if you want to put it another way, is made even harder because these IMS applications have been around for a long time. They've been augmented and edited and improved over a very, very long piece of time. So there's a lot of customized changes that have been made, and to get that logic built into a new application can sometimes be, an almost insurmountable sort of task. So there's a lot of, we'll call it friction, in trying to move from an IMS based application to one that uses DB2. And when we talk about the risks, there are some things you can do. Excuse me, I went too far. There are some things you can do to minimize those risks. And what we want to talk to you about today, and I'll be turning it over to Denise in just a few minutes, but I wanted to sort of introduce you to our solution to help you with this. And it's a product called SyncSort Optimize IMS. And what it really is a combination of IMS and DB2 migration and mapping capabilities that gets the IMS segments represented as DB2 tables. And what you're actually doing is migrating your data that lived in your IMS database into DB2. And then the interface between the IMS application and the new IMS migrated to DB2 data is what we really help you with. And Denise will show you how that works in a minute here. What we do is replace IMS with DB2. We move that data into DB2, and that allows you to not have to keep the IMS database up and running. You don't have all the support tools. You don't have all the programming challenges that you would have if you continue to stay on DB2. You're able to, on IMS, you're able to now have that data living in DB2, and you don't have to rewrite your applications because the application still thinks it's talking to IMS, not to DB2. That's the magic that Denise is going to share with you in a minute. So it brings you down to a world where you're just supporting one mainframe database platform, DB2. You don't have to support IMS and be working some applications that are newer that are built on DB2. You can get to a more single database platform, just have everything on DB2. And it gives you this data migration process or route from the IMS DB to the DB2 database. Again, just want to make sure I point this out. Doesn't replicate the data to DB2. It replaces the IMS DB. So you're not just moving the data from IMS to DB2. You're actually having the application know where that the call is. It's an IMS call, but we translate it so it actually can get the data it needs from the DB2 database. It doesn't touch the application code. You do not need to rewrite all of your applications, because as I pointed out on the prior slide, trying to do that, it's very, very hard to do. So just a quick, before I turn it over to Denise, I want to kind of sum up with a little bit of what it is and what it's not, okay? So what Optimize IMS really provides, again, is migration and mapping of those IMS segments to DB2. So it's a migration capability. It does replace all of your IMS. It replaces basically the DB stub program that IMS has, and points that request, that call from the application to DB2. It really does provide a replacement for IBM IMS DB. It does not require you to keep your IMS database up alongside your DB2. It will actually eliminate it, and it will eliminate the support tools that you needed. What Optimize IMS is not, it's not just replicating data to DB2. It's replacing the IMS database and having all of that data live in a DB2 database where, again, you can have people operate on it. that know DB2 and do those kind of things, but your application didn't have to change because we know how to point that application's requests that it thinks it's talking to IMS, but it's actually talking to DB2. It's a bit magic, but Denise is going to show you now a little bit at a high level how this works. Actually getting into the specifics would be something we would need to do with you on an individual basis and talk through. But I will turn it over now to Denise and let you kind of step through how this thing works.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. So let's look at the before of your migration process. As Bill explained, you're going to take a phased approach to move your data from one database to the other. So your current state here is your applications programs go through an IMS stub, which passes your calls into the IMS database. On the next slide. So while you were working through the migration of your data and taking that data and mapping it to a DB2 database, what Optimize IMS does is it replaces that calling program. You can think about it like a old-fashioned switch operator, and it'll determine whether or not the data resides currently in IMS or it goes over to DB2, and it'll make the appropriate call to the right database. So we determine, where that data lives. The application runs like it always has, but we just call the appropriate data store to carry out that request into the right database. And on the next slide, we show what you've done here is that you've completed your migration of data. The stub from Optimize IMS stays in place, and ultimately it's only going to call DB2 from that point on.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and pick up here with the ZincSort IMS and choosing whether it's right for you, and is there considerations that you need to be thinking about it, whether this is the right solution for you to get from your IMS environment today to the DB2 world that maybe you want to get into. So, why would you use this? Well, it's way less risky than trying to recreate all of your IMS applications in DB2. So it reduces the risk. It addresses that staffing challenge because you're going to be able to choose from a much bigger pool, of database administrators with DB2. And then the other piece that Denise just explained, I'll reiterate, what we really do is convert that data that lives in IMS into DB2 tables, and then the IMS-based application just continues to make the same calls. We translate it, and it it makes the call to the DB2 environment where you can get that data. All those third-party tools we talked about, you no longer will need those. So there's significant cost savings. And once you've converted your databases, all of the ones that you want to convert from IMS to DB2, those DB2 skills and SQL skills, frankly, can be applied to those applications into that database environment. So it's just more of a modernization again of your environment. So Optimize IMS becomes a stepping stone really to an application modernization and gets you to DB2 and SQL away from your IMS environment. Kind of in summing this up, so there's really three reasons we talk to customers about. The ones that mostly are so compelling to them are extending the life of their applications. They've spent years building up the business logic in these IMS applications, and you're able to maintain all of that without rewriting the application, but move to a more modern and flexible database, the DB2 database. Addresses the staffing challenge because it's easier to find DB2 people than it is to find IMS skilled people. And then the other one is just the cost reduction, which is really significant for a lot of customers that we have. And the license fees for IMS and the related tools around that can generate quite a bit of expense for them on a yearly basis. So they do save those. And these are the top three reasons that we have people engaging with us for an Optimize IMS engagement. All right. So with that, I do think we've got time for a couple of questions. We do have a few here in the chat. Let me see here. is Optimize IMS software services? Good question. It's actually a combination of both. It's there is a software component to it, mostly in that stub that Denise talked about, but a bigger element of what we help you do in an Optimize IMS engagement is figure out how to stage and do that migration of IMS data into the tables in Db2. So there is an element of service engagement and also an element of some unique software capabilities. So they work hand in hand, and we can help you through this process. And we've done this for hundreds of companies, so we've seen a lot. We kind of know what you can expect. Okay, there's a couple here about timeline. How long does it take to do this? And the answer is, of course, it depends. And the reason it depends is most people's implementation looks not like a single sort of effort, but it's a database by database, application by application sort of staged process where you're not trying to do everything at once. You can compress the timeline by doing multiple things in a much shorter period of time. Most of our customers do it more of a stage by stage. This application is most important. I want to do that one first. We get through that process, then we'll take the next one in line, or sometimes they'll do multiple, or organize them by sets and do them quarter by quarter or things like that. So I mean, this can be something that goes on and modernizes, if you want to use that word, your environment over a long period of time, but you can compress that time. It's pretty much all up to you in terms of how you want to stage that engagement. So it is, again, the answer to the question short is it depends, but that's why it depends, because you're really in control of how fast or how slow you want that engagement to go. So I'm going to go ahead and close this up here. I really appreciate you taking the time, Denise. I appreciate your input here, your time presenting for us. I hope that it's been educational for you, and I would encourage you, if you've got questions about how this works, reach out to your Precisely rep, or we're very easy to get a hold of. Just go to our precisely.com website and you can contact us, tell them what you're looking for, and we'll get you in touch with the right person. So again, thank everyone for attending today. Appreciate your time and hope to see you on our next webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.